Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing well today. It is Thursday, March 30th, and as always, I'm your host, Ethan Richards, at Ethan Richards at Instagram, joined by.
And my name is Jack Zalta. You can find me on Twitter at ZaltaJack.
Yeah, so today we have a lot of cool stuff lined up for the show. We're going to be joined today by Rohan Lulla, our guest. And first, we're just going to talk about March Madness up to this point, give a little recap on that, as well as a preview of the upcoming Final Four games this weekend. So, welcome, Rohan. Glad you could join
Thanks,
us.
guys, for having me. You can find me on Instagram at rohan.lula. And I'm really excited to get into kind of a rundown of the Final Four.
Yeah, so let's hop right into it. So it's been a very crazy tournament. I think it wouldn't be bold to say maybe the most crazy tournament we've ever seen. First time no one seed has made it to the Elite Eight. We have a 9 seed, 2 5 seeds, and a 4 seed in the Final Four. I mean, it's really just been madness.
Truly, yeah. I think last week was really highlighted by a couple of great games. One of those being the Michigan State and Kansas State game. That was it was the first overtime game that the tournament has seen. And that game definitely lived up to all the potential and hype that it was giving off. The Sweet 16 was honestly a really interesting round. Seeing FAU beat Tennessee was certainly a shock to me. Seeing that Gonzaga UCLA game going back and forth and trading threes to end the game was just absolutely mind-boggling, really. It was one of the best games I've seen all year. And UConn, it continues to be dominant. They had an almost 23-point win over Arkansas, which is just it's stating to everyone else that they are here and they are ready to compete for the championship, which is exactly where they're at right now in the Final Four.
Yeah, so it's great to see that this Final Four is the first time that no 1 through 3 seed has actually made the Final Four. So, it's been so full of surprises. I think that the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games were super exciting and electric. One of my favorite games was Gonzaga UCLA in the Sweet 16. I thought that was just one of the most perfect kind of March Madness games that we can witness as fans. And how about, the fact that it's such a good time right now to be a Canes fan? I mean, first Final Four appearance ever, and probably the best weekend I've ever seen for Miami sports. I mean, you beat 1 seed Houston, and then you beat the 2 seed Texas team after a great comeback. So seeing the Canes roll right now, I mean, there's a lot of hype going on there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Texas game, I thought it was all wrapped up and, you guys were sent home, but, you guys had a lot of fight left in you. And it's definitely a good lineup of Final Four teams. And going back to the UCLA Gonzaga game, which both of you guys have touched on, after that game, I fully was convinced that Gonzaga was going to win the tournament because I thought UCLA, in my eyes, was the best team. Mm-hmm. And then Gonzaga beats them, goes on, and they just get absolutely destroyed by UConn, lost by 28 points. It was not even really a game. I mean, this has been – I can't even count the number of times I've been wrong this tournament. You always start to think like this team's going to go this way or something like that, and then it's just upset after upset, and it's really been fun to watch. It's been awesome.
No, exactly. And shout out to Drew Timme also finishing up his last game at Gonzaga. I think one of the best college careers you can have in the last, I would say, like 20 years for sure. So, he really put on a great performance in that UCLA game, and it's been really exciting to see him play in the last few years.
Definitely. Yeah. He's one of those players that I feel like I've seen in the tournament, and that's been relevant since he got to college. So it's great to see him.
Yeah, he's been the face of March Madness and college basketball, I think, for the last few years.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And another game that I thought – oops, sorry. Go ahead.
Just he's a legend of the tournament, that's for sure.
Definitely, yeah. And another thing that another game that I thought was really interesting that Ethan touched on was the Miami versus Texas game. They were down by about, I think it was 13 or 15 points in the second half with about maybe it was 12 or 10 minutes to go, I think. And they rallied like no team from Miami has ever really rallied. It seemed like they were absolute toast. And it went on some crazy run. It was just the defense stepped up and the three started falling. And when those two things happen for Miami, they're almost unbeatable. I mean, that's exactly what happened versus Houston, and they got ahead early and never let that lead up. So I think that if Miami can start out hot against UConn, there's a good chance that they keep this game close.
Yeah, definitely. And you could really see Wong and Pack were kind of struggling in the first half. I think they had combined like 4 or 5 points, and they had to turn it on, and they did. They contributed the amount of points. They really, even for a team that doesn't have the best size or kind of length, they really showed like great defensive strides. And in my eyes, them or Connecticut are really kind of the two favorites going into the Final Four, even though they're playing each other.
Yeah, and I think highlighting the game from Texas was actually Jordan Miller's performance. 27 points, 7 for 7 field goals, and 13 for 13 free throws. This guy did not miss a single shot he took all game. I think that is astonishing, especially because it's on one of the biggest stages he's ever been on personally. So hopefully Miami can continue to keep rising to their potential and keep games close, hopefully, and maybe even win.
Yeah. I mean, the tough thing with UConn is that they've won all their games so far by 15 or more points. They've really been dominating on all sides of the ball. So I really think this is going to be – I mean, the thing is the Canes have also faced some really tough opponents in their last 3 games, being Indiana, Houston, and Texas. So I think that they have a lot of hype, and the heat is with them right now to go into this game and hopefully make it a close one and win it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And one more team that we haven't actually spoken too much about is San Diego State, who really honestly surprised Creighton. I thought Creighton would have too much offensive power and too much pace for San Diego State to keep up with, but San Diego State played at their own pace, their own style, and they won the game their way of 57-56, which is just absolutely classic San Diego State basketball if you've been watching them over the season.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
it's one of those teams that whenever it comes to the tournament, I always pick them to lose first round, and I did it again this year. And they've shocked me every round so far. I mean, they go on, they beat Charleston first round, and then they had a pretty weak opponent in Furman. But then they beat Alabama, who I think was probably the best team going into that round, and they didn't just beat them; they won by 7. It looked pretty handily. And then you go and look at the San Diego squad, and there's really no standout guys. I mean, I think they have one guy that averages over 10 points a game in Matt Bradley, averages 12.5. And then after that, there's one guy averages 9 points, 8.7. It's really just a collective effort. I mean, I think in terms of all-around team, they've really shown that they're just a really well-coached, well-rounded team.
Definitely. Yeah, they're very disciplined, honestly. They do what they need to do, and everyone does their job, and that's how that team plays. They're great, honestly, and they should have a good chance to beat FAU on Saturday. We'll see. But just speaking more about what happened in the past tournament, I thought that the FAU game and Kansas State game was just absolutely incredible in MSG. I thought that atmosphere was just absolutely bonkers, and the game went back and forth constantly. I thought Kansas State was going to win. I thought Noel was going to pull through for his team, but I think the injury kind of got to him, and the team just couldn't pull themselves together enough to put enough points in the basket, obviously, and FAU came out on top.
Yeah. With that Kansas State team, they really impressed me with some of their games. I thought that guard, Marcus Noel, was unbelievable. I think his game against Michigan State was one of the best performances I've ever seen for a guard. He is 5'8" also, which is crazy. But in that game, he put up a record 19 assists, which is the most in tournament history. So he was just, dishing it out every game, going double digits on assists. So he really caught my eye in those Kansas State games.
Yeah. And I think that even going into that game, I mean, a 9 seed making it to the Elite 8 is pretty rare. And Florida Atlantic University, they really didn't get much press going into that. I mean, they beat Farley Dickinson, which is one of the great stories of the tournament, taking down 1 seed Purdue, second time ever. They barely won their first matchup against Memphis. They won by 1 point. And then they go in, win by 7 against Tennessee. As we said, won by 3 against Kansas State. And I feel like a lot of people were really riding for Kansas State, but then Florida Atlantic wins and now they're in the Final Four. And it's kind of like, how did this happen? But, going into the tournament, 35-3 record, they won the Conference USA, not really a very notable conference, but I got to say, FAU can play. They're a legit team. I mean, I think going into the Final Four, they're maybe one of the weaker teams, but I mean, they've proven why they're here, and I think that they deserve where they're at right now.
Certainly, and on Saturday, FAU is only a +2 against the much higher seeded San Diego State. And with that being said, do you love betting? Well, now you can show off your passion for sports betting at bettingsuperstore.com. Unique and original gear from t-shirts to hoodies to mugs and backpacks. Bettingsuperstore.com is a lock to let everyone know that you are the ultimate sports betting guru. Check it all out at bettingsuperstore.com. With that, I want to say thank you to our guest this week, Rohan. I appreciated you having you on, and I look forward to speaking to you next week.
Thanks, guys, for having me. Always love talking about college basketball, and looking forward to next week.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Rohan.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
See ya. All right, so moving on to our next topic, it's time to do a deep dive into our 2 Final Four matchups. Scheduled right now for Saturday, April 1st. It'll be taking place in Houston at the NRG Stadium. So let's get right into it. First matchup at 6:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is, as you mentioned, San Diego State versus Florida Atlantic. San Diego State enters as a -2, so a 2-point favorite with an over-under of 131.5. So yeah, what are your thoughts heading into that game?
I think it's really interesting to see the over-under at 131.5. I think that's a little bit high, but obviously they're expecting things to, I think, open up, and for these teams to play a little bit looser under the circumstances. So I think I like the game to go over, honestly, which is I think might be a shock. But as far as who wins the game, I've been going back and forth all week. I think the line screams that FAU is going to win this game, but if I'm betting it with my own money, I really don't see myself putting money on a team from Boca Raton personally.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. Like I said, I've been a San Diego State doubter my whole life, and they've kind of turned my opinion around after that Alabama win and the Creighton win as well. FAU's going in, they have a 19-point margin of the more points scored than their opponents, which is only 4.75 a game, while San Diego State has a 37-point margin of 9.25 points per game. So San Diego State's been handling their opponents pretty well. Both of these teams, as I mentioned, won their respective conference, San Diego State in the Mountain West, and then FAU in the Conference USA. And then something that I think is kind of interesting to look at is the Basketball Power Index. Is that I didn't realize this until after the fact. Heading into the tournament, both of these teams are in the top 35 in BPI. San Diego State, 15th in the country in BPI. Florida Atlantic University, 33rd, which is the lowest of the Final Four teams. But I think that really can just be attributed to strength of schedule. When you're in the Conference USA, the best team you're going to see is North Texas. So not the best opponents, but they have a really great squad. I mean, like you said, I could really see this going either way. As far as the point total, I think that if San Diego State wins, it'll go under just because they like to play kind of their own pace and stuff like that. But I could fully see FAU, just opening it up and, really just shooting the lights out. They have some good shooters. I mean, Brian Greenlee, he only averages 7.4 points per game, but he averages 41% from three. A couple other shooters, Vladivostok Golstink from Russia, the big center, averages 10 points per game, 6.6 rebounds per game, and shoots 63% from the field while playing 24 minutes. So he's really kind of been their anchor, I feel like, going into these games. They have some good pieces around him, but I really think it'll kind of rely on Vladivostok if they want to, make some noise in this game.
Certainly. And I think for FAU as well, I think Janelle Davis, who's been shooting, I think, 49.3% field goal percentage on the entire year. 85% at the free throw line, and almost 14 points per game. If FAU is going to have a chance, he's going to have to show up and he's going to have to score his average points.
Yeah,
Moving
definitely.
on to the later game, which is Miami, the 5th seed versus the 4th seed UConn. At 8:49 p.m. The line right now, I believe, is 5.5 for UConn, and the over/under is, I'm pulling it up right now, it is 149.5, which is quite a high number. Typically for Miami, they're usually hanging around 140 or 100, high 130s. But Miami has been shooting lights out all tournament, and it certainly wouldn't shock me for these teams to push this over, even though it's quite a hefty number.
Yeah, I mean, Miami especially, they have 3 guys that shoot above 36% from 3 in Isaiah Wong, Jordan Miller, who you guys mentioned had a great game last round, Nigel Pack. They're really just a very skilled offense. All 3 of those guys all play over 30 minutes a game, which is very rare in college. You usually see maybe a little bit more guys getting involved. And then they also have Norchad Omir, which he's averaging a double-double this year with 13.3 points and 10.1 rebounds a game while shooting 58% from the field. So Miami, they have just an all-around solid squad. I mean, as I mentioned, the BPI for the other team, there's 26th in BPI, which I really don't think shows how good this team is. They didn't win the ACC championship. They lost to Duke in a close matchup, but they finished with the best record, 29-7 in a pretty tough conference. So, these guys have seen tough opponents all year. They've battle tested, as Rohan mentioned in the last segment. Drake, not the best opponent, but then they went on and beat Indiana and Houston, both by double digits, a combined 30 points, and then went on, had a comeback win against Texas, which got them here. I don't see how it's just hard. I keep going back and forth because UConn played so well, but it's hard to count these guys out. The Hurricanes have just all tournament have showed what they're made of, and, they've made it all the way this far for a reason.
Absolutely agreed. And I think it's really interesting that the Hurricanes have been, since the first round matchups, they've been an underdog in every game that they've played in. So I think it's interesting that the books have such a negative viewpoint of this team. But it's something that really interests me because it's almost like why do they keep making the same mistake? But clearly there's something in their system that's telling them that Miami is not a good enough team to compete with these teams right now. And I feel like UConn wins, but I feel like Miami does show up, and I think Miami maybe covers the spread on the hook, but I don't see it being much closer than 4 or 5 points personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard just looking at UConn's schedule in the tournament. They lost the Big East tournament to Marquette by 2 points. And then since that loss, they've had 90-point margin above their opponents in the past 4 games, averaging 22.5 points per game. They've won every game by 15 points. And their last 3 games against 5-seed St. Mary's, 8-seed Arkansas, 3-seed Gonzaga, they're playing good teams, and they're just wiping the floor with them. I do expect this to be a really good game. I don't think that the spread is very accurate. I think Miami will cover maybe like a 3-4 point game. I kind of agree with you there. But in my eyes, these are the 2 best teams in the Final Four, and you got to give the trophy to whoever wins this game. So this is the game I'm more excited for. It tips off at 8:50. It's really going to be good just because there's superstars on both teams. And I keep mentioning BPI. This was something that caught my eye before the tournament. They went in as a 4 seed. They have the 3rd best BPI in the nation, behind only Alabama and Houston. So, these guys are battle tested. These guys are proven. They have the stats to back them up. And I kind of think that the tournament selectors underrated them a little bit going into this tournament. And I don't know if that was at Connecticut, but they're showing why.
Yeah. I think that was mostly due to their loss versus Marquette in the Big East. And I think that kind of set them back in the eyes of the committee, especially because they didn't win their conference. But I think overlooking that, this team has been absolutely strong all year. They have some questionable losses for sure, but those have not come recently, and they're playing the best ball that they've played all year. So I think UConn advances. I think Miami keeps it close. I think that this game also goes over. But that's all I have on the Final Four for this week. You have any more thoughts, Ethan?
I think we covered it pretty well. The one thing I just wanted to point out is the guys to watch out in this UConn game. They're the only team that had two guys averaging over 15 points a game in the past 2 rounds in Adama Sanago and Jordan Hawkins. Sanago's averaging 17.1 points per game, 7.5 rebounds per game, 60% shooting, and 35% from 3. And Hawkins, 16.3 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 38% from 3, and then an 89% free throw. So these are two, I'm not going to say NBA talent guys, but they could be. These are good prospects. This is a really, really solid team. Yeah, the Miami UConn game that's a game you're not going to want to miss. It's going to be
must watch TV. Absolutely.
Yes, definitely must watch TV. And I'm excited for the other one too, but I really have my eyes on this game. It's going to be really exciting.
Definitely. And I think next week we'll be speaking about the MLB as the MLB. It has their opening day today, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
But we'll see everyone next week. Thank you all so much for tuning into the Noops Sports 2.0 show. My name is Jack Zalta. You can find me on Twitter at ZaltaJack.
And I'm Ethan Richards at Ethan Richards on Instagram. Yeah, thanks for joining us, you guys. It's been a great show. Great as always joining you, Jack. See you guys next week.